The night the sirens broke the stillness of Willow Creek, Laura Whitman was standing on the back porch of her mother's old farmhouse, staring into the endless cornfields that shivered under the Missouri wind. It was supposed to be a quiet visit, a short break from her exhausting job in Chicago and an escape from the divorce papers she still hadn't signed. She thought this trip would give her space to breathe. But when the blue and red lights flickered along the dirt road, and Sheriff Dalton Hayes stepped out of his patrol car with his hat twisted nervously in his hands, Laura felt her stomach drop in a way she hadn't since she was a teenager. "Laura," he said, voice rough like gravel under boots, "we need to talk about your brother." Laura felt her throat close. "Mason? What about him?" Dalton glanced toward the cornfields, as if the night itself might overhear. "He's missing." The world narrowed. For a moment Laura couldn't hear anything except her own pulse slamming in her ears. Mason wasn't the type to disappear. He was the dependable one, the grounded one, the last family thread holding their mother together after their father died. "Missing how?" Laura demanded. "He didn't show up for his night shift at the grain elevator," Dalton said. "His truck was found abandoned near Old Mill Road. Door open, headlights on." Laura stepped off the porch, cold air biting at her face. "And you're only telling me now?" "We tried calling," Dalton said, his gaze tightening. "Your phone didn't connect." She exhaled shakily, no surprise. Reception here was always spotty. But before she could speak again, a sound echoed from the tree line behind the barn. A sharp crack, like a branch snapping, or a footstep. Dalton's hand flew to his holster. "Get inside," he ordered. But Laura didn't move. Something out there, some instinct, pulled her. The night felt wrong. Too alive, too aware. She whispered, "Someone's watching us." Dalton scanned the dark. "I'll check it." He stepped away, boots crunching on dry leaves, flashlights slicing between the trees. Laura's heart pounded as she watched the beam flicker, then freeze on something. "Dalton." No answer. The sheriff moved slowly forward, shoulders stiff, the beam trembling. Then a deer burst from the woods, leaping across the yard. Dalton exhaled sharply and lowered his gun. "Just wildlife," he muttered, though his voice betrayed his nerves. For a moment, Laura relaxed. But then she saw it. A shape behind the trees, tall, motionless, watching them. A silhouette. And when her eyes focused, she realized the figure wasn't running like the deer. It was standing still. Too still. Dalton spun toward her. "Inside. Now." She obeyed, but not before stealing one last glance. The figure was gone. Inside, her mother, Carol Whitman, sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling around a cup of tea. "I heard the sirens," she whispered. "It's Mason, isn't it?" Laura sat beside her. "Mom, we'll find him. He's probably—" But she couldn't finish, because she didn't believe it herself. Not after what she saw in those trees. Over the next hour, Dalton explained everything. Mason's abandoned truck, his missing phone, the footprints leading toward the riverbank, then suddenly stopping. "Like he vanished," Dalton said. Laura clenched her fists. "Mason doesn't vanish. Someone took him." Dalton hesitated. "We don't have evidence of that." Laura slammed her hand on the table. "Then find it." But before Dalton could respond, a loud thud shook the house. Something hitting the front door. Everyone froze. Dalton drew his gun, signaling them to stay back. He approached the door slowly, then swung it open. A small cardboard box sat on the porch. No note, no delivery truck, no footprints, just the box. Dalton picked it up, jaw clenched. "Laura, don't touch it," he warned as she stepped closer. He opened it carefully. Inside was Mason's watch, still ticking, Still warm. Laura gasped. Where the hell did you find that? Dalton shook his head. This wasn't here when I arrived. Carol covered her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Laura's mind raced. Someone had been close enough to the house to leave the box and watch them. She whispered, "The person in the woods." Dalton swallowed hard. "It could be a message. Or a threat," Laura said. "Or a game." But the real shock came when Dalton lifted the watch. Beneath it, hidden under a layer of paper, was a folded map. He opened it slowly. The map showed Willow Creek, but with one specific location circled in bright red marker: Harper's Quarry, an abandoned limestone pit 5 miles away, a place known for accidents, trespassing teens, and one unsolved disappearance 20 years earlier. And scrawled across the bottom in bold, shaky lettering were 4 words: "Find what he hid." Laura's breath caught. What he hid? What did Mason ever hide? Carol whispered. Dalton shook his head. "I don't like this." "We're going," Laura said immediately. Dalton frowned. "Laura?" "He's my brother." She grabbed her coat. "And I'm not sitting here waiting." Dalton knew she wouldn't back down. "Fine," he said tightly. "But you stay behind me." They drove through the dark farmland toward the quarry, headlights bouncing over gravel, wind slapping against the truck. "Mason ever mention the quarry?" Dalton asked. "No," Laura muttered. "He hated the place, said it gave him a bad feeling." Dalton didn't respond. He had that same feeling now. When they reached the entrance, the air felt heavier, colder. The gate was hanging open. Someone had been here recently. They stepped inside silently, the beam of Dalton's flashlight cutting through dust and broken stone. The quarry descended into a massive pit, surrounded by crumbling machinery and rusty conveyor belts that groaned in the wind. Laura scanned every shadow. Nothing. But then she noticed something strange. Fresh tire tracks leading deeper inside. They followed the tracks until they reached an old storage cabin. The door was cracked open. Dalton motioned for silence, then pushed it fully open with his boot. Inside, the cabin was empty, except for a single wooden crate in the center. Laura approached it slowly. Her heart hammered. She lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of old documents, photographs, handwritten notes, all stamped with one name: Whitman Construction Company, her father's company, the one that went bankrupt 15 years ago, the one that tore their family apart. Laura whispered, "Why would Mason hide this?" Dalton frowned. Maybe he found something he wasn't supposed to. Laura flipped through the documents: land deeds, purchase records, inspection reports, all connected to the quarry. And then she saw it. A letter from her father, addressed to Mason, dated 1 week before his death. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Mason, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. The quarry accident wasn't an accident. I uncovered the truth, and I fear they know I did. Protect your sister. Protect your mother. And whatever you do, never trust Dalton Hayes." "Dad." Laura froze. Dalton stepped toward her. "What does it say?" She hid the letter behind her back. "Nothing," she lied. "Just company records." But Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Laura." She shook her head. "Not now." Her mind was a storm. Never trust Dalton Hayes. But he'd been her father's friend, their neighbor, practically family. Before she could think further, a loud crash erupted outside the cabin. Someone was running. Fast. Dalton raised his gun. "Stay behind me." But Laura ignored him, bolting outside. She spotted a figure darting behind an excavator. "Hey!" she shouted. The figure sprinted toward the far ledge of the quarry. Laura chased after them, her breath searing her lungs, gravel skidding under her boots. "Stop!" she yelled. The figure stumbled, slipped, and a beam of moonlight hit their face. Laura froze. It was Mason, gaunt, bruised, wide-eyed with terror. "Laura!" he gasped. "You're not supposed to be here." She ran to him and threw her arms around him. "Mason, what happened? Who took you?" Mason grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me, you have to leave. Now." Dalton reached them, gun still raised. "Mason, calm down." Mason recoiled. "Don't you touch us." Laura's heart pounded. "Mason, what is going on?" He shook his head frantically. "It's not just the quarry. It's not just Dad. There's a hole." A gunshot cracked through the night. Mason's words cut off. Dalton shoved Laura behind him. "Get down." Another shot pinged against the metal. Someone was firing from the ridge. Laura screamed Mason's name, but he was already dragging her behind a boulder. "They followed me," Mason panted. "They knew I'd lead you here." More shots thundered. Dalton returned fire. The shooter vanished into the dark. When the gunfire stopped, Mason held Laura's face in his hands. "Laura, listen carefully. Dad found out the quarry was being used. Not for mining, but for something else." "Something else?" she whispered. Mason nodded. "Money laundering, illegal shipments, and someone in this town was letting it happen." Laura remembered the letter, her father's warning. Never trust Dalton. She swallowed hard. "Mason, who?" Mason hesitated. Dalton approached slowly. "Let him talk." Mason looked at him with pure contempt. "You know damn well who." Dalton stiffened. "Don't start this again." "Again," Laura whispered. Mason's voice cracked. "Dalton was in it with them. All of them. Dad confronted him the night he died." Laura felt everything inside her break. Dalton whispered, "That's not true." Mason shot back. "You left him there. You walked away and let them kill him." Dalton's face twisted with anguish. "I tried to stop them. I failed. I've lived with that every day since." Laura stared at him, rage trembling through her. "And you never told us?" Dalton's voice trembled. "Your father begged me to protect you. I thought the truth would destroy your family." Mason shook his head. "The truth was the only thing that could have saved us." Another shot ripped through the air, this one hitting Dalton in the shoulder. He cried out and fell to one knee. Laura screamed. Mason grabbed her hand. "We have to go. Now." He pulled her into a narrow tunnel carved into the quarry wall. "Where are we going?" she gasped. Mason pointed to the darkness ahead. "To Dad's safe house." "He had a safe house?" Laura whispered. "Yes, and it holds everything. Every document, every recording, every name." Behind them, voices echoed, multiple men shouting. Flashlights bounced along the quarry floor. They were being hunted. Mason pulled Laura deeper into the tunnel until they reached a metal door hidden under collapsed stone. He shoved it open and revealed a small underground shelter with dusty shelves and an old generator. "Dad built this before he died," Mason said. "He knew he was in danger." Laura scanned the room, overwhelmed. "Mason, why didn't you tell me?" "Because once you knew, they'd come after you too." Footsteps thundered from the tunnel outside. Mason locked the safe house door and bolted it. "We don't have much time." He grabbed a dusty metal case from the shelf and opened it. Inside were flash drives, tapes, papers, and a black ledger full of names and payments. Laura flipped through it, then froze. "Dalton Hayes," she whispered. Mason nodded sadly. "He was part of it. But he flipped, he tried to expose them. That's why they threatened him. Why he kept quiet. Why he protected us." Laura felt tears burn her eyes. Everything was a knot of grief, betrayal, love, and fear. Then they heard explosions. The tunnel shook violently. Stone rained from the ceiling. The safe house door buckled as someone tried to break it down. Mason grabbed Laura's hand. "There's another exit." He pulled her to the back of the room and lifted a heavy grate leading into a drainage shaft. "Go!" They crawled through the tight passage until they reached another metal grate. Mason kicked it out, and they emerged behind a barbed wire fence near the river. On the ridge above, men with rifles scanned the area. "Stay low," Mason whispered. They crawled through the tall weeds until they reached the old bridge. The river roared below. "Mason," Laura whispered, "what's the plan?" He took her face in both hands. "We exposed them. All of them. Everything Dad died for." Laura nodded, trembling. "Then let's finish it." Suddenly headlights blazed across the bridge. A truck screeched to a halt. A door slammed. Dalton, bleeding, pale, but standing, stepped toward them. Laura raised her guard. "Stay back." Dalton lifted his hands weakly. "I'm not your enemy." Mason stepped in front of Laura. "You should have told us the truth." "I was trying to keep you alive," Dalton said. "And I'm still trying." Before they could answer, more headlights appeared behind him. 2 black SUVs barreling down the dirt road. Dalton shouted, "Get off the bridge!" Mason grabbed Laura's hand. They sprinted to the side of the bridge as the SUVs skidded to a stop and armed men poured out. Bullets exploded against the railing. Dalton returned fire despite his wounds. Mason pulled Laura toward the maintenance ladder on the side of the bridge. "Climb!" he yelled. Laura swung over the edge, clinging to the cold metal. Mason climbed right behind her. Gunshots echoed above as the river roared below. One man shouted, "Don't let them reach the water." A bullet grazed Mason's arm. He winced but kept moving. Laura descended the ladder until she reached the rocky shore. Mason jumped the last few feet, stumbling beside her. "This way!" he shouted over the water. They ran along the riverbank, staying in the shadows. Behind them, the men scrambled to follow, but the rugged terrain slowed them down. Dalton's voice echoed faintly. "Gunfire!" Shouting. Laura's chest tightened. "Mason, he's buying us time." Mason's eyes softened. "He always did." They reached a small fishing shack by the river. Mason forced the door open. Inside was an old ham radio and a dusty laptop. "Dad kept backups everywhere," he explained. "We upload the evidence. Send it to every news station, every federal agency." Laura booted up the laptop. Mason connected the flash drive. But just as the files began to upload, a shadow fell across the doorway. A man stepped inside. Tall, cold-eyed, dressed in black. Laura recognized him from town, Richard Hale, the wealthy owner of the quarry. A man who pretended to be a pillar of the community. Now his smile was ice. "You two have caused me a great deal of trouble." Mason positioned himself in front of Laura. "It's over, Hale."
"Hale chocolate." "No, son.
It's only over when you stop breathing." He raised his gun, but a shot rang out first. Hale staggered, a bullet in his shoulder. Behind him stood Dalton, leaning against the doorframe, barely conscious, gun shaking in his hand. "Don't touch them," he rasped. Chaos erupted. Mason lunged at Hale, tackling him. The gun skidded across the floor. Laura kicked it away. Hale slammed Mason into the wall. Mason gasped but fought back, punching Hale across the jaw. Hale grabbed a metal pipe and swung wildly. Mason ducked, but the pipe scraped his arm. Dalton collapsed to his knees, too weak to stand. "Laura!" The upload. She sprinted to the laptop. 78%. Hale roared and shoved Mason aside, charging toward her. Laura grabbed the metal pipe and swung with all her strength. Connected with Hale's arm. He flinched, snarling. Mason tackled him again, wrestling him to the floor. 92%. Hale overpowered Mason, pinning him by the throat. "This ends now," he hissed. Mason struggled, his face turning red. Laura screamed and grabbed Hale's gun. Her hands shook violently. "Let him go."
Hale laughed.
"You don't have it in you." 96%. Laura steadied her breath and fired. The bullet hit the floor inches from Hale's hand. He flinched long enough for Mason to break free and punch him across the jaw, knocking him unconscious. 100%. Upload complete. Laura collapsed in relief. Sirens wailed in the distance. Dozens of them. Police, state troopers, federal agents. Everything Mason and their father had fought for was finally exposed. Dalton lay against the wall, pale, breathing shallow. Laura knelt beside him. "Stay with me," she begged. Dalton managed a faint smile. "Your father, he'd be proud." Mason grabbed Dalton's hand. "You saved us." Dalton closed his eyes, whispering, "I owed him that." When the authorities stormed the shack, they arrested Hale and his men. Mason and Laura were taken to safety. Dalton was rushed to the hospital. A week later, standing on the farmhouse porch, Laura watched the sunrise over the Missouri fields. Mason stood beside her, arm bandaged but healing. "I never wanted you to be part of this," he said softly. Laura leaned against him. "We're family. We face things together." Mason smiled faintly. "What now?" Laura took a shaky breath. "Now, we live. Finally." But just as they turned to go inside, Laura's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. One sentence. "Your father wasn't the only one who knew." Laura froze. "Mason, look." Mason read the message, his face draining of color. Hale's partner." Laura whispered, "This isn't over." Mason rested a hand on her shoulder. "Then we finish what Dad started." And behind them, the morning sun rose over Missouri, warm, peaceful, unaware of the storm about to break again.